Chapter 4. The Valley of Fear. When McMurdo woke up next morning, he had had good reason to remember his initiation to the lodge. His head ached with the effect of the drink, and his arm, where he had been branded, was hot and swollen. Having his own peculiar source of income, he was irregular in his attendance at his work, so he had a late breakfast and remained at home for the morning, writing a long letter to a friend. Afterwards, he read the Daily Herald. In a special column put in the last moments, it read, "Outrage at the Herald office. Editor seriously injured." It was a short account of the facts with which he has himself been more familiar than the writer could have been. It ended with this statement: "No matter how, the matter is now in the hands of the police, but it can hardly be hoped that their exertions will be attended by any better results than in the past. Some of the men were recognized, and there is hope that a conviction may be obtained. The source of the outrage was, it need hardly be said, the infamous society which has held this community in bondage for so long a period, and against the Herald has taken so uncompromising a stand. Mr. Sager's many friends will rejoice to hear that, though he has been cruelly and brutally beaten, and has sustained severe injuries about the head, there is no immediate danger to his life." Below it stated that a guard of the coal and iron police, armed with Winchester rifles, had been requisitioned for the defense of the office. McMurdo had laid down the paper and was lighting his pipe with a hand which was shaky from the excess of the previous evening, when there was a knock outside, and his landlady brought him a note which had just been handed in by a lad. It was unsigned, and ran thus: "I wish to speak to you, but had rather not do so in your house. You will find me bedside the flagstaff upon Miller Hill. If you will come there now, I have something which is important for you to hear, and for me to say." McMurdo read the note twice with the utmost surprise, for he could not imagine what it meant or who was the author of it. Had it been in the feminine hand, he might have imagined that it was the beginning of one of those adventures which had been familiar enough in his past life. But it was the writing of a man, and of a well-educated one, too. Finally, after some hesitation, he determined to see the matter through. Miller Hill is an unkept public park in the very center of town. In summer, it is a favorite resort of some of the people. In winter, it is desolate enough. From the top of it, one has a view not only of the whole grimy, strangling town, but of the winding valley beneath, and its scattered mines and factories blackening the snow on either side of it, and of the wooded and white-capped ranges which flank it. McMurdo strolled up the winding path, hedged in the evergreen, until he reached the desired restaurant, which forms the center of the summer gaiety. Beside it was a bare flagstaff, and a man underneath it, his hat drawn down and the collar of his overcoat raised up. When he turned his face, McMurdo saw that it was Brother Morris, who had incurred the anger of the bodymaster the night before. The lodge sign was given, and they exchanged as they met. "I wanted to have a word with you, McMurdo," said the older man, speaking with a hesitation which showed that he was in delicate ground. "It was kind of you to come." "Why did you not put your name on the note?" "One has to be cautious, mister. One never knows in times like these how things may come back to one. One never knows either who to trust or who not to trust." "Surely one may trust the brothers of the lodge." "No, not always," cried Morris with vehemence. "Whatever we say, even what we think, seems to go back to that man McGinty." "Look here," said McMurdo sternly. "It was only last night, as you well know, that I swore good faith to the bodymaster. Would you be asking me to break my oath?" McMurdo, who had been watching his companion very narrowly, relaxed somewhat on his bearing. "Sure, I spoke for myself only," he said. I'm a newcomer, and I'm strange to it all. It's not for me to open any mouth, Mr. Morris. And if you think well to say anything to me, I am here to hear it. I have to take it back to Boss McGinty, said Morris bitterly. Indeed, then, you do me an injustice there, said McMurdo. For myself, I am loyal to the lodge, and so I tell you straight, but I would be a poor creature if I were to repeat it to any other what you might say to me in confidence. I will go no further. It will go no further than me, though I warn you that you may get neither help nor sympathy. I have given up looking for either one or the other, said Morris. I may be putting my very life in your hands by what I say, but bad as you are, it has seemed to me last night that you were shaping to be as bad as the worst. Still, you are new to it, and your conscience cannot yet be as hardened as theirs. That was why I thought to speak to you. Well, what have you to say? If you give me away, may a curse be on you. Sure, I said I would not. I would ask you then, when you joined the Freeman Society in Chicago and swore the vows of charity and fidelity, did it ever cross your mind that you might find it would lead you to crime? If you call it crime, McMurdo answered. Call it crime, cried Morris, his voice vibrating with passion. You have seen little of it if you can call it anything else. Was it crime last night when a man, old enough to be your father, was beaten till the blood dripped from his white hairs? Was that crime, or what else would you call it? There are some would say that it was war, said McMurdo. War of two classes with all in, so that each struck as best it could. Well, did you think of such a thing when you joined the Freeman Society in Chicago? No, I'm bound to say I did not. Nor did I when I joined it in Philadelphia. It was just a benefit club and a meeting place for one's fellows. Then I heard of this place. Curse the hour that the name first fell upon my ears. And I came to better myself. My God, to better myself. My wife and 3 children came with me. I started a dry goods store in Market Square, and I prospered well. The word had gone round that I was a freeman, and I was forced to join the local lodge, same as you did last night. I have the badge of shame on my forearm and something worse branded on my heart. I found that I was under the orders of the black villain and caught in the meshwork of his crimes. What could I do? Every word I said to make things better was taken for treason, same as it was last night. I can't get away, for all I have in the world is in my store. If I leave the society, I know well that it means murder to me, and God knows what to my wife and children. Oh, man, it is awful, awful. He put his hands to his face, and his body shook with convulsive sobs. McMurdo shrugged his shoulders. You are too soft for the job, said he. You are the wrong sort for such work. I had a conscience and a religion, and they made me a criminal among them. I was chosen for a job. If I backed down, I knew well what would come of me. Maybe I'm a coward. Maybe it's not poor my little woman and children that makes me hound. Anyhow, I went. I guess it will haunt me forever. It was a lonely house, 20 miles from here, over the range yonder. I was told off at the door, same as you were last night. They could not trust me with the job. The others went in. When they came out, their hands were crimson to the wrists. As they turned away, the child was screaming in the house behind us. There was a boy of 5 who had seen his father murdered. I nearly fainted with the horror of it, and yet I had to keep a bold and smiling face, for well I knew that if I did not, it would be out of my house, and they would come next with their bloody hands, and it would be my little Fred that would be screaming for his father. But I was a criminal then, part sharer in a murder, lost forever in this world, and lost also to the next. I am a good Catholic, but the priests would have no word with me when I heard that I was a scourer, and I was excommunicated from my faith. That's how it stands with me, and I see you going down the same road, and I ask you what the end is to be. Are you ready to be a cold-blooded murderer also? Or can we do anything to stop it? What would you do? Asked McMurdo abruptly. You would not inform? God forbid, cried Morris. Sure, the very thought would have cost me my life. That's well, said McMurdo. I'm thinking that you are a weak man, and that you make too much of the matter. Too much? Wait till you have lived here longer. Look down the valley. See the cloud of 100 chimneys that overshadows it? I tell you that cloud of murder hangs thicker and lower over the heads of the people. It's the valley of fear, the valley of death. The terror in its hearts of the people from the dusk till dawn. Wait, young man, and you will learn for yourself. Well, I'll let you know what I think when I have seen more, said McMurdo carelessly. What is very clear is that you are not the man for this place, and that the sooner you sell out, if you get only a dime a dollar for what business is worth, the better it will be for you. What you have said is safe with me, but, by gosh, if I thought you were an informer... No, no, cried Morris piteously. Well, let it rest at that. I'll bear what you have said in my mind. Maybe someday I'll come back to it. I expect you meant kindly by speaking to me like this. And now, I'll be getting home. One more word to you, said Morris. We may have been seen together. They may want to know what we have spoken about. Ah, that's the thought of. I offer you a clerkship at my store. And I refuse it. That's our business. Well, so long, Brother Morris, and may you find the things go better with you in your future. That same afternoon, as McMurdo sat smoking, lost in thoughts, beside the stove of his sitting room, the door swung open, and its framework was filled with a huge figure of Boss McGinty. He passed the sign, and then, seating himself opposite the young man, looked at him steadily for some time, a look which was steadily returned. I'm not much of a visitor, Brother McMurdo, he said at last. I guess I am too busy over the folk that visit me. But I thought I'd stretch to the point to drop down to see you at your own house. I'm proud to see you here, Counselor, McMurdo answered, heartily, bringing his whiskey bottle out of the cupboard. It's an honor that I had not expected. How's your arm? Asked the boss. McMurdo made a wry face. Well, I'm not forgetting it, he said, but it's worth it. Yes, it's worth it, the other answered, for those that are loyal, and those who go through it, and are a help to the lodge. What were you speaking to Brother Morris about at Miller Hill this morning? The question came so suddenly that it was well that he had his answer prepared. He burst into a hearty laugh. Morris didn't know I could earn a living here at home. He shan't know either, for he has got too much conscience for his likes of me. But he's a good-hearted old chap. It was his idea that I was a loose end, and that he would do me a good turn by offering me a clerkship at a dry goods store. Oh, that was it? Yes, that was it. And you refused? Sure. Couldn't I earn 10 times as much money in my own bedroom for 4 hours' work? That's so, but I wouldn't get too much about with Morris. Why not? Well, I guess part's because I don't tell you not. That's enough for most folks in this part. It may be enough for most folks, but it ain't enough for me, Counselor, said McMurdo boldly. If you're a judge of men, you'll know that. The swarthy giant glared at him, and his hairy paw closed for an instant around the glass as though he would hurl it at the head of his companion. Then he laughed out loud, boisterous in insincere fashion. You're a queer card, for sure, he said. Well, if you want reasons, I'll give them. Did Morris say nothing to you against the lodge? No. Nor against me? No. Well, that's because he daren't trust you. But in his heart he is not a loyal brother. We know that well, so we watch him, and we wait for the time to admonish him. I'm thinking that the time is drawing near. There's no room for scabby sheep in our pen. But if you keep company with a disloyal man, we might think that you are disloyal too, see. No chance of my keeping company with him, for I dislike the man, I answered. As to being disloyal, If I was any man but you, he would not use a word to me twice. Well, that's enough, said McGinty, draining off his glass. I came down to give you a word of season. You've had it. I'd like to know, said McMurdo, how you ever came to learn that I had spoken with Morris at all. McGinty laughed. It's my business to know what goes on in this township, said he. I guess you'd best reckon on my hearing all that passes. Well, time's up, I'll just say. But his leave-taking was cut short with a very unexpected fashion. With a sudden crash, the door flew open, and three frowning, intent faces glared in on them under the peaks of police caps. McMurdo sprang to his feet and half drew his revolver, but his arm stopped midway as he became conscious that two Winchester rifles were leveled at his head. The man in uniform advanced into the room, a six-shooter in his hand. It was Captain Marvin, once from Chicago. And now the coal and iron constabulary. He shook his head with a half-smile at McMurdo. I thought you'd be getting into trouble, the crooked McMurdo of Chicago. He said, can't keep out of it, can you? Take your hat and come along with us. I guess you'll pay for this, Captain Marvin, said McGinty. Who are you? I'd like to know, to break into the house of this fashion, and molest honest, law-abiding men. We're standing out in this deal, Counselor McGinty, said the police captain. We are not here after you, but after this man McMurdo. It is for you to help, and not to hinder us in our duty. He is a friend of mine, and I'll answer for his conduct, said the boss. By all accounts, Mr. McGinty, you may have the answer for your own conduct one of these days, the police captain answered. This man McMurdo was a crook before he ever came here, and he's a crook still. Cover him, patrolman, while I disarm him. Here's my pistol, said McMurdo coolly. Maybe, Captain Marvin, if you and I were alone and face to face, you would not take me so easily. Where's your warrant? Asked McGinty. My gosh, a man might as well live in Russia as in Vermissa, while folk like you are running the police. It's capitalist outrage, and you'll hear more of it, I reckon. You do what you think is your duty the best way you can, Counselor. We'll look after ours. What am I accused of? Asked McMurdo. Of being concerned in the beating of old Editor Stager at the Herald office. Wasn't it your fault that it isn't a murder charge? Well, if that's all you have against him, cried McGinty with a laugh, you can save yourself a deal of trouble by dropping it right now. This man was with me in my saloon playing poker up to midnight, and I can bring a dozen to prove it. That's your affair, and I guess you can settle it for tomorrow. Meanwhile, come on, McMurdo. Come quietly if you don't want a gun butt across your head. You stand wide, Mr. McGinty, for I warn you I will brook no resistance when I'm on duty. So determined was the appearance of the captain that both McMurdo and his boss were forced to accept the situation. The latter managed to have a few whispered words with the prisoner before they parted. What about? He jerked his thumb upwards to signify the coining plant. All right, whispered McMurdo, who had devised a safe hiding place under the floor. I'll bid you goodbye, said the boss, shaking hands. I'll see Riley, the lawyer, and take the defense upon myself. Take my word for it that they won't be able to hold you. I wouldn't bet on that. Guard the prisoner, you two, and shoot him if he tries any games. I'll search the house before I leave. Marvin did so, but apparently found no trace of the concealed plant. When he descended, he and his men escorted McMurdo to the headquarters. Darkness had fallen, and a keen blizzard was blowing, so the streets were nearly deserted. But a few loiterers followed the group in. Emboldened by invisibility, shouted imprecations at the prisoner. Lynch the cursed scourer, they cried. Lynch him! They laughed and they jeered as he was pushed into the police department. After a short formal examination from the inspector in charge, he was handed into the common cell. Here he found Baldwin and three other criminals of the night before, all arrested that afternoon and waiting for their trial the next morning. But even within the inner fortress of the law, the long arm of the freeman was able to extend. Late at night, there came a jailer with a straw bundle for their bedding, out of which he extracted 2 bottles of whiskey, some glasses, and a pack of cards. They spent a hilarious night without an anxious thought as the ordeal of the morning. Nor had they cause, as the result was to show. The magistrate could not possibly, on the evidence, have brought in the sentence that would have carried the matter to a higher court. On the one hand, the compositors and pressmen were forced to admit that the light was uncertain, that they were themselves much perturbed, and that it was difficult for them to absolutely swear to the identity of the assailants, although they believed that the accused were among them. Cross-examined by the clever attorney who had been engaged by McGinty, they were even more nebulous in their evidence. The injured man had already disposed that he was so taken by surprise by the sadness of the attack that he could state nothing beyond the fact that the first man who struck him wore a mustache. He added that he knew them to be the Scours, since no one in the community could possibly have had any enmity to him, and he had long been threatened on the account of his outspoken editorials. On the other hand, it was clearly shown that the united and unfaltering evidence of 6 citizens, including the High Municipal Office Councillor, McGinty, that the men had been at a card party at the Union House until the hour very much later than the commission of the outrage. Needless to say that they were discharged with something very clear to an apology from the bench for the inconvenience which had been put out, together with the implied seizure of Captain Marvin and the police for their officious zeal. The verdict was greeted with loud applause by the court in which McMurdo saw familiar faces. Brothers of the lodge smiled and waved, but there were others who sat with compressed lips and brooding eyes as men filed out of the dock. One of them, a little dark-bearded, resolute fellow, put the thoughts of himself and his comrades into words as the ex-prisoners passed him. "You damn murderers," he said. "We'll fix you yet."